Welcome to the What's on Tap podcast, everybody. This is Wilder Adams bringing back a very old podcast that I used to run throughout my high school years, and I'm just happy to be back. I'm not going to lie. I've always wanted to bring this podcast back, but I wanted to do so in a way that felt right, in a way that felt organized, that felt sustainable, in a way that I am able to complement some of the work that I do. And I think I have found that formula. So we'll see if I have. And in the meantime, we'll keep experimenting. We'll keep growing, hopefully. And yeah, just once again, thank you so much for hopping on the show. So bringing back the show, I am going to bring similar variety to what I did last time. I am planning on bringing, normal takes, normal predictions, normal mocks, mock drafts, mock trades. I'm going to have a series of guests, and I want to bring like variety of guests, right? Like some people who are fans, who are friends, some people who are analysts, people who could bring like, substance and just talk about the game. I also want to bring in, experts who can legitimately inform us about the game and help, just expand our knowledge instead of just fun fan fodder. And lastly, if I can, a few months ago on the Windshield Hoops podcast, I was able to bring in, or Zach brought him in. I just kind of sat there and took advantage of his connections, but love you, Zach. But we brought in Luca Garza for the Windshield Hoops podcast. So that was super fun. Just, having an athlete to talk to. And I'm hoping to do that on this as well. Bring in some athletes in the future just to talk about their career and their life in the NBA and all of that stuff. Maybe college prospects. I am honestly a very open door with the possibilities of this podcast. But, today we got a super fun show. I am going to talk about like 5 or 6 different topics that kind of expand all around the NBA. What I am doing a little differently on this relative to the old podcast is I am going to start bringing in like more of a theme in my topics. It's more young player oriented, even though I'll still bring in some of the general NBA topics. So today we're talking about Victor Wembanyama, Tyrese Haliburton. We're going to talk about the top of the 2022 NBA draft. Just how does that draft look, many years after, or not many, like a year after, but you get the point. And then I'll talk about the Warriors and just my sentiment on, the growing trend in the NBA with how rosters are being, developed relative to a couple years back. And to close it off, I want to talk about the top of the 2024 NBA draft. So without anything else, let's get started. So to start out right away, let's talk about Victor Wembanyama and the San Antonio Spurs. And I think if people followed my social media, throughout the year, I was pretty vocal that I think Victor is the best prospect since LeBron. As a matter of fact, I think he is a better prospect than LeBron was. Not saying he's going to be better than LeBron, but if you put both of them next to each other as 18-year-old children, 19 in Victor's case, you're talking about, okay, am I taking this skilled 7'4", switchable, unbelievable international talent who's proven playing international basketball, or 18-year-old high school LeBron? I think Victor would get my vote for number one, even though that's very likely to be wrong because LeBron, in my opinion, is the GOAT, right? So I've been very out there about Victor, and ever since he's been put at center for the San Antonio Spurs, he's been just unbelievable. I mean, nearly 20 points, over 14 rebounds, over 3 blocks, just stacking up the stocks. And his efficiency is getting better because he's playing more inside out rather than outside in. So he's been unbelievable lately. And I'm not saying like I've been disappointed with this play. I think it's impossible to really be disappointed about a 19-year-old kid playing, 19 and 10 basketball and doing it on both ends. At this point, being a rookie averaging 19 points per game, but being ahead on the defensive end, more so on the offensive end, that is honestly pretty unheard of. That's super rare. I mean, usually when you're like a defensive prospect, you come in as a defensive prospect, right? With room to grow offensively, like Anthony Davis. Or if you're an offensive scoring engine, like an Anthony Edwards, back here this way, you expect the 19 points, but you expect horrendous defense, right? Victor's giving you both, but the expectations have been just so unbelievable for him. And I'm part of that problem. I'm very much a part of that problem that like we're kind of holding him to the expectation of, okay, so what's going to hold him back from being one of the greatest to ever do it, right? This isn't like, can he be a superstar? Can he be an all-NBA player? we all don't really doubt that. It's, can Victor Wembanyama be the GOAT of this generation? And if not, what's going to hold him back? And throughout these first 20 games, I think it's very obvious what would hold him back if he doesn't get there. And it's the shooting. It's the shooting. Victor Wembanyama at this point is not a good shooter of the basketball. He is really never shot over 30% from three in his life. Even when he was playing like a small sample size in Europe, he wasn't shooting 30%. And then when he goes into play for Metropolitan 94, he's shooting 28% from three, despite what he shot in that exhibition game in the G League. And then now he's in the NBA. He's taking over 5 threes a game, and he's shooting 28% from three. We don't have a sample size at all of Victor Wembanyama being a good shooter. We've seen flashes. He's got a good-looking shot, good on the free throw line. It can hit really tough shots. He's just not efficient at it at all. And I think with Victor, being 7'4", his size is advantageous in a way that's different from a guy like Shaq, right? I don't think he's ever going to be just physically overwhelming on offense. I don't think he's just going to throw his body at you and just get a bucket all the time. Like, obviously, he can use his freaking 8-foot wingspan and just slam it on you and get inside. And he's going to be very efficient inside. I mean, he's shooting 72% from the paint right now. But with Victor Wembanyama, I think the size long-term, because he is so skinny, is going to be more, of a benefit as a jump shooter, because you can't really contest what he does, right? You can't contest 7'4". You can be 6'11" with length, and Victor's just going to look right over you because he's flipping 7'4", So that's like the advantage. And if Victor Wembanyama had Kevin Durant's shot, he would literally be impossible to guard. So the problem, though, is he doesn't shoot like Kevin Durant right now. Another problem is he isn't an overwhelming athlete physically just to muscle his way into the paint. So, like, not saying he won't be a fantastic paint scorer, because he will. He already is, because of his height, his touch, and he's only going to get bigger and stronger. But like I said, his interior presence isn't as high as a Shaq, and to add to it, I don't think it's as high as what Jokic and Embiid can do inside right now, right? I think what makes Victor Wembanyama a potential incredible offensive talent, like an all-time great offensive talent, is the ability to get inside, but also be dangerous with his jump shot, because you can't guard that, and that can open himself up inside, especially when defenses don't know exactly how to guard you, because it's like, if I'm up on you, you're going to shoot over me. But if I give you too much space, you're going to dunk on me, So it's an interesting balance with him. But if Victor Wembanyama never becomes able to take advantage of that shooting prowess that he naturally possesses and can't consistently beat you with that jump shot, I really think that's going to limit his ability to be, best player in the world. Like, do I still think he could be a top 5 player in the NBA being a 32% three-point shooter? Absolutely, because I do think he'll get in the paint enough. He is going to be a defensive player of the year multiple times in his career, on top of the on-ball playmaking stuff he possesses. But I think for him to really move the needle and become, like, in the conversations that we were putting him in the beginning, that jump shot needs to be really good. Maybe not Kevin Durant good. Heck, I'm not even sure if it needs to be Chet Holmgren good. But can he become, a near 37% three-point shooter? Can he do that on high volume? Can he do it off the dribble? Can he be one of those guys like a diet KD from the perimeter and uses that to use his length inside? Like, I think that's what's going to come down to. And I'm not saying I don't think it will come together, because if you ask me right now, I do think Victor Wembanyama's jump shot will come together, but I think it's going to take time. And I think if he doesn't add it, I do think that puts a slight cap on his ceiling. Not like a huge cap. We're talking like a miniature cap right here, like this bottle cap right here, like a really small cap to your ceiling. But it's going to be like, okay, he might be a top 5 player in the world someday, but he's never going to be, the Hakeem of our generation. Which is, I still think it's almost stupid that we're throwing these words out at a 19-year-old kid, regardless of the level of prospect he was. But it's real, and those expectations aren't going away. You don't hate the player, hate the game. So that's what I'm basically saying. If Victor Wembanyama becomes a really good shooter, I think he can be the best player in the world. And honestly, I think the Spurs is a great spot for him, because they've been known for developing shooters. But if he doesn't develop as his jump shot, I do think it puts a slight cap on his offensive ceiling, which I think further adds to the question, can he be best player in the world? And I think if he doesn't have a jump shot, the answer is no. So a couple weeks ago now, Adrian Wojnarowski, he reported that Tyrese Haliburton is sort of recruiting NBA stars right now. I mean, obviously Tyrese Haliburton is setting the world on fire. He's been truly one of the 3 best offensive players in the entire league this year. I mean, 27 points a game on 65 true shooting and double-digit assists. I mean, and the efficiency he's doing it with such little turnovers, being the engine of a number 1 offense in the NBA that doesn't have a second star. I mean, there's no question how great Tyrese has been. And like I said, Woj has reported that Tyrese Haliburton is trying to recruit stars right now. And the Pacers are really bad on defense, horrendous on defense. And that's going to be the big question for this Indiana team going forward. And if they can acquire a star who is able to do it on both ends of the floor, that would be a massive, massive bonus. But I do think the most important thing for a star to fit next to Tyrese Haliburton is how he complements, or how that star complements Tyrese Haliburton offensively. And then you could build around the rest of the roster defensively. I also think that there's going to be an internal growth with the defense on this roster, because I really think long-term, even though Mathurin's IQ is low right now, I do think long-term with his athleticism, with his toughness, I do think the defense will come together there. Aaron Nesmith has taken a big leap defensively. Miles Turner is kind of a fake good defender, so if you can flip him, get some real rim protection, that would be good. And, you know, I think Nembhard can defend a little bit. Like, they got some guys who can sort of defend. Obi Toppin, not at all, but you get the point. They can build defense around Haliburton, but with that being said, let's see the top 5 stars I have as fits next to Tyrese Haliburton. There's a couple guys left out, like Pascal Siakam. And the reason why, like, while I think he's a better two-way player than a lot of the players that I'm mentioning right now, I really do question, you know, his fit with Tyrese offensively, because not a great floor spacer, not a great off-ball scorer, and we've seen that in Toronto. And I think we've seen like the Masai Ujiri sort of passive-aggressive references at Pascal not being a team player. So I don't think he's a bad fit next to Haliburton, but he's just not top 5 on this list. So here's my top 5 fits next to Tyrese Haliburton. And to be honest, there's like 1.5 two-way players on this list, which isn't ideal, but this is like among stars that could realistically be available this summer. Like, I could tell you all I want that I think Giannis will be a great fit next to Haliburton, but let's be real, he's not going to Indiana. So here are my top 5 realistic star fits. Number 5, I got Zach LaVine. And the thing with Zach is he's had a really down year in Chicago right now, and I think it's way deeper than basketball. A couple of years ago, like during the pandemic year, Zach LaVine was maybe the most efficient 27-point-per-game scorer in the league. And he was able to do it off the dribble. He was able to do it in transition. He's an excellent shooter, excellent shooter. Like, he might be the best shooter in the league for the level of athleticism he has. I mean, he's an excellent shooter. And I think if you put him next to Tyrese Haliburton, while the defense is horrendous still, you can maybe hope that the physical tools come together and he can be a good defender next to Tyrese. But even so, if he isn't, he's someone who doesn't need the ball in his hands. He is somebody who can shoot off the catch, who's excellent in transition, and could play Tyrese Haliburton off the ball, and Zach LaVine could get Haliburton open shots. You know, I think he's a fantastic offensive talent. And when you look at the stats this year, he's down to like 21 points per game. I still think if you put Zach LaVine in a situation he's comfortable in, he can be a legitimate 25-point-per-game scorer for you. So putting that next to Tyrese Haliburton, I think would be a good fit, especially because I don't think he costs much at this point. I think with the way the Bulls are winning without him, with the contract questions, with the injury questions, I used to think you had to trade like Benedict Mathurin and then stuff for him. I don't even think you need to do that anymore. It might cost a pick and like Bruce Brown. I'm not kidding. And if they can get Zach LaVine for that type of price, I think you pull the trigger. And I think Zach would be a great fit. Okay, number 4, Zion Williamson. So Zion at his peak next to Tyrese Haliburton would be freaking special. This would be the closest thing we've ever seen to Steve Nash and Amari Stoudemire if they put it together. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. Haliburton and Zion in the pick and roll. How the hell do you guard that? You let Haliburton shoot? Oh, wait. you let Haliburton get inside, and then you have to focus on Hallie, and then you lob it to Zion. Oh, wait, what about Zion Williamson's interior pressure? You're going to focus on Zion and let Haliburton shoot? Like, literally the only thing you can do is hope they make a mistake, hope they turn the ball over, hope they miss a three-pointer, because other than that, they're scoring on you. So offensively, this would be great. And if Zion Williamson was a better leader, if he was more healthy, if he was just more dependable overall, I think he might be number one on this list. I just think the questions and the baggage that Zion Williamson possesses, that is my main question about him fitting next to Tyrese Haliburton and pretty much every other star, any other team in the NBA. I think that's more of a Zion Williamson question than it is a Tyrese Haliburton and Zion Williamson concern. Number 3, Lauri Markkanen, Utah Jazz. I think he's the most realistic guy at this deadline outside of Zach LaVine to be dealt. There's already a lot of rumors about him going to OKC. Danny Ainge is saying that he's worth 5 first thing. And look, maybe he is. I don't think he is. I just think Danny Ainge is an excellent negotiator. And I think he's so good at utilizing the media to maximize the value of his own players. So I don't think that's what it is. But I think if they do deal Lauri Markkanen, I think he is like perfect on any team in the NBA. And that includes next to Tyrese Haliburton, because he's outside of Steph, outside of KD, I think Lauri Markkanen is the best off-ball scorer in the NBA. I mean, 7 foot, fluid, excellent off-ball instincts, really good cutter, can run off screens, money from 3, can hit mid-range shots, can dunk it on you. He's just so good at getting offense in the flow. He literally gets 25 a game in Utah purely in the flow. There's not many players you can say that about. So Lauri Markkanen has, I think, complementary skills that would fit so well next to Tyrese. And he's honestly a better defender than some of the guys that I'm mentioning on this list, because he's a solid team defender with his overall length and above average quickness. So I think Lauri would be very intriguing next to Tyrese Haliburton. And then number 2, my Wolves fans, I know they're going to hate this, but Karl-Anthony Towns. And the only reason I'm mentioning Karl-Anthony Towns, even though he's probably having the best year of his career, the Timberwolves are 19-5, it's because you still have to consider the CBA. I'm not saying they will deal Karl-Anthony Towns this summer. I'm not saying that. I think if the Timberwolves go to like the Western Conference Finals, I think they just run it back. But I think considering the CBA, the ramifications that are coming, when you're paying 4 guys like contracts north of 130 and 3 of them supermax contracts, essentially, somebody's going to have to get moved. Somebody will, either next year or the year after. And until the Timberwolves prove that they can make a finals run this year or a Western Conference Finals run, I think you still have to mention these guys as potential trade candidates. And Karl-Anthony Towns on this Tyrese Haliburton Indiana Pacers, I think, would be so fun. Cat has done a great job this year, honestly, defending. He's been like in defensive plus minus, he's been like a top 5 percentile defender all season long. And the eye test, well, I don't think it suggests he's a top 5 percentile defender. I think the eye test suggests he's been more engaged. He's a really good and physical one-on-one defender. The fouls feel a little more in control since the start of the season. And he's a little more mobile than the average big. So I don't think he's a complete waste on the defensive end anymore. And offensively, you got the second best shooter in the NBA in Tyrese Haliburton, and you pair him with the best shooting big in the league. The second best shooting big ever behind Dirk. I still respect Dirk. I can't put Cat over him. But I think that is just excellent room for dynamic offense. And speaking of, you could do a pick and roll with Cat and Haliburton. Cat has a more like versatile skill set than a Zion Williamson does. You can get Cat in the pick and roll. You can get him in the pick and pop. He can create off the dribble and get open looks for Tyrese Haliburton. Cat is a legitimate 3-level scorer. And I think if you put him next to just an amazing engine in a Rick Carlisle offense that is just all flow, man, that's intriguing. Like, my heart would probably hurt watching him kill it in a different organization. But I think when you consider this particular conversation, I do think that Indiana's a great fit for him. And I hope Cat has a great playoff run and he runs it back from Minnesota next year. But if that isn't meant to be and he has to go somewhere else, I think Indiana is my favorite spot for him. And plus, he stays in a small market, so you got to still support him like that. He's not like doing the prima donna New York stuff. Well, maybe he might. I don't know. My dad always said he felt like a Knick, so I don't know. But Cat, I think, would be a really good fit next to Tyrese Haliburton. And number one on my list, I have Paul George finishing up his career on the Indiana Pacers. And here's the thing. Paul George has a player option this summer. He has the option to leave this summer, and he and Tyrese Haliburton have a relationship. We've seen Tyrese on his podcast, and they have a really good relationship. Obviously, Paul George has a connection to Indiana as he started his career there. So I think Paul George would be, I can't put words in his mouth, but I would be surprised if he wouldn't consider Indiana if things fall through in Los Angeles. And you're talking about a team that really needs defense, and you're getting maybe not peak Paul George defensively, but a well above average perimeter defender who can give you 23, 24 a game, who can give you secondary playmaking, who can play Tyrese off the ball, who can guard your best defender or best player on the opposing team. And he's so versatile. You can mismatch so many players next to Haliburton and Paul George and make that lineup work because Paul George does a lot of the stuff that Tyrese Haliburton lacks. He's a great rebounder for his position, great point of attack defender. And then if Nesmith and Benedict Mathurin grow in that regard, and then maybe Miles Turner benefits a lot from the point of attack defense improvement with Paul George on the team, I think that could help Turner's rim protection. I mean, Miles Turner is a really good blocker. It doesn't mean he's a great rim protector. And honestly, like besides the 2 blocks a game, he is pretty much food in the paint sometimes. But I think if you get him comfortable in the perimeter, I think that could elevate Miles Turner's defense. So I think that he'd be a significant upgrade to the defense. The one problem is definitely the timeline questions, but I think outside of that, I would be a big fan of Paul George in Indiana, and that's my top 5. I had number 5 Zach LaVine, 4 Zion Williamson, 3 Lauri Markkanen, 2 Karl-Anthony Towns, and 1 Paul George on great potential fits. And I left out Pascal Siakam. I did not forget him. I just didn't think he was top 5. All right, so let's transition to my next podcast or topic regarding the 2022 NBA Draft. And on Pick a Side, I suggested a question like, who would you take number 1 in a 2022 NBA Redraft, Chet Holmgren or Paolo Banchero? And that's a tough question. That's a question that I go back and forth on every single day. Like, first of all, I don't think if you're Orlando, I think both players fit tremendously in Orlando. Orlando's really built a defensive identity, and they've done that without really great interior defense. I mean, Wendell Carter's been hurt. Mo Wagner's not a good interior defender. Like, if you imagine Chet Holmgren being the anchor of that defense, I think that would only elevate them and honestly, minimum make them number 2. And also, Chet Holmgren would add more floor spacing than a Paolo Banchero would. And I still think he has the upside to be a primary scorer, right? So Chet Holmgren in Orlando would have been a really good fit. And going back into 2022, he is the guy I would have taken number 1 overall if I were the Magic. But on the other hand, Paolo Banchero is flipping special, guys. I mean, I saw him yesterday drop 36 and 11 against Boston, and he just does it in such a unique way. Being that young, being built like that, he's built like a young LeBron, man. Physically, he looks like a young LeBron. Like, obviously not the same explosion, but he's just a walking dumbbell, and he can get his own shot off in the paint, and he's got great feet, and he can pull up in the midi, and his jump shot's gotten better. He's unbelievable. And Paolo Banchero, to me, is going to be one of the very, very best engines in the NBA offensively down the road. I think this is a guy, because especially he is excellent at getting to the free throw line early, I think there's a very straight path for him to being a near 30-point per game scorer and being a very good playmaker as well. So it's a tough question because both are fantastic and they both went top 2, rightfully so, and what's turned into a very good 2022 NBA Draft. And look, if you say Chet Holmgren number 1, I wouldn't have a problem with that. But for this topic, I think Orlando would still stick with Paolo Banchero. I think a very big aspect of this is the fact that Chet Holmgren missed his rookie season. Chet Holmgren coming into the league, y'all, was one of the most controversial prospects in a long time because we've never really seen a big man that skinny before make it to the extent Chet Holmgren's making it right now. You know, I mean, 7'1", 190 is ridiculous. That's just a ridiculously small weight. So Chet Holmgren, on top of that baggage, that isn't his fault. It's just there. And he getting hurt against LeBron James in Seattle, I don't think if he went number one, that would have changed. I mean, this is all like the butterfly effect, right? But I don't think that anything would have changed. He probably still gets hurt if he plays in Seattle. And I think considering the baggage of the narratives behind him, plus him missing the entire rookie season as a number one pick, not that I don't think Chet wouldn't have figured it out because I think there's a toughness about him. I just think that weight wouldn't have been worth it for what Paolo Banchero is bringing you as the rookie of the year last year, as somebody who is proving to be a legitimate all-star caliber player his second year, giving you 21, 7, and 4. You know, as somebody who is clearly fit this defensive scheme in Orlando. Like, he's never going to be Chet Holmgren defensively, but he is not a bad defender. And he has enough size and enough length with a 7-foot wingspan to be a good interior defender. Maybe long-term, he ends up being the starting 5 in Orlando, you know, as a solid enough rim protector with enough mobility, you know, somebody who could be a great offensive player and take the big out, but also not be a complete waste on defense. I think with what Paolo Banchero is bringing you, I don't think there's really any reason for the Magic to change, on top of the fact that long-term, I do trust Paolo Banchero's body, his frame more. Like, Chet's been healthy this year, but so far in their careers, Paolo's been healthier, and his body is just way more like stout and proportional than Chet is, right? I'm not a doctor, and if somebody hears a doctor and you're saying I'm an idiot, I have no idea what I'm talking about with bodies, you're right. But my inference tells me that Paolo Banchero's body is more trustworthy than Chet's. And I think the safe element of Paolo plus the upside of still being a superstar, I don't think Orlando would make a big change. Chet Holmgren might, at his very best, his apex, be better than Paolo. And he's probably slightly better than Paolo Banchero right now with what he is as a defender. But I think Paolo's close enough right now with the lack of health questions where I would do anything different. Okay, enough of this young player talk for a minute. I want to talk about the Golden State Warriors. The Golden State Warriors that Draymond Green just got suspended again indefinitely for punching Yusuf Nurkic. This is bizarre. First of all, I'm happy what Adam Silver did, because at a certain point, like, look, if anybody else in the league did what he did to Yusuf Nurkic, it would be a 5-game suspension, right? But Draymond has not built good credibility because he has a history of doing that, right? So no brainer. The Draymond Green thing is nasty, and this Warrior thing is nasty. 6-10 their last 10 games. Bad bench. Outside of Stephen Curry, there's not really great offense. I mean, Steph is giving you inefficient 29 a game right now, and the Warriors are a bottom half offense with that caliber of an offensive engine. It took over 10 games for there to be any other 20-point per game scorer on that Golden State Warriors roster. It's bad. It's bad. And some of your best defenders on this team have injury questions, like Gary Payton, and Draymond, it's more emotional availability questions. We'll call it that. Andrew Wiggins, he's not doing good. I mean, he's playing better lately. And I mean, you hear about him just, he's out of shape. He came in the season out of shape, and it's showed on the court. This Warriors team is done. This Warriors team is not going to contend. I honestly think regardless of what happens at this deadline, they're not going to contend. So this makes the conversation tougher, because if I don't believe that the Warriors can contend, usually my first thought is, okay, then start a rebuild, right? Look at the cap situation. Where does this team have room to grow? They objectively don't have room to grow to make an NBA Finals anytime soon without major changes. That would be defying the odds, even if they made big changes. 90% of the time, I would say rebuild. But this is where politics comes in. Stephen Curry is the greatest player in Warriors history. Obviously, they had Wilt Chamberlain, but I don't think that's rocket science to say that Steph Curry is the greatest player in Warriors history. And I think if you're the Warriors, I think it comes into politics. Stephen Curry, you want him to stay with the Warriors his entire career, like Dirk did, like Tim Duncan did, like Kobe did. You want Stephen Curry to follow that line. And if he doesn't feel like he has a chance to win, I don't know Steph, but I think it's fair to infer he would look at other options. So I think the Warriors are at a tough spot here where politically they should just say, like, look, man, we might not have a chance to contend for a championship anytime soon, but Stephen Curry, damn it, he's our guy. We got to give him a chance to win and at least, ride off to the sunset smoothly instead of, having a Detroit Pistons situation where you're losing 22 in a row. I don't think you need that. So I think that this deadline in particular, the Warriors really need to look at making moves. And I mentioned the Tyrese Haliburton star ranking list. They could look at some of those stars too and try to bring in a Pascal Siakam, bring in a Lauri Markkanen, a Zach LaVine, just somebody who gives offensive punch next to Stephen Curry, somebody who you would say, okay, this puts the Warriors in a playoff lock. I don't see a scenario unless they just stole multiple stars away from teams, which is literally impossible. I don't see a scenario this team contends in any stretch of the imagination. But if you're the Warriors, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Give Stephen Curry a chance to just compete at this point of his career. Give him a chance to have another star next to him. And even if you don't think you can win a championship, when you have an irrationally confident, which is what it takes to be an all-time great in Stephen Curry, you can convince them that, hey, look, Pascal Siakam here, this is a guy you can ride with, right? So I think you can make it work where Stephen Curry is competitive with the Warriors with the rest of his career if you make the right moves at the deadline. Chris Paul, not a great option anymore. He is not a good basketball player right now. Straightforward. I still agreed with the Jordan Poole trade because I think Jordan Poole is a mess of a basketball player. And you get off of that contract because Chris Paul is an expiring deal. In the short term, probably makes sense to add Chris Paul and a young player or two, maybe a pick, and bring in another asset. I don't think that politically they're going to get rid of Klay Thompson or Draymond Green or anybody like that. And honestly, they probably shouldn't. I mean, Klay's playing better lately. He's been really good the last 3 games from the moment I'm recording this. But, I don't think you split those 3 apart to keep Chris Paul's contract on the team. Are we serious? It's not like Chris Paul and Stephen Curry ever had a chance to compete together. That was what I said when the trade happened in June. Look, man, people question the Minnesota Timberwolves big man and how they can defend in the playoffs. I mean, if we're going to do that, I'm going to question if 2 guards that are a little over 6 feet tall in their late 30s can defend in the playoffs. Chris Paul is not the same defender anymore. This isn't 2008. Stephen Curry is a fine defender. So they just won't work. So might as well deal Chris Paul because there's no real attachment to what he brings to the table because he hasn't been that good this year. And teams will see value in an expiring contract for a star if you add young assets like a Kuminga or a Moody or a Podminski, who's not a great fit on that team anyway, right? So I think that the Warriors should just go all in for Steph, even if there's not real light at the end of the tunnel in terms of championship aspirations. Two more topics left in the show. Thank you guys so much once again for listening to this first episode. I'm just excited to keep this going, but this year this NBA season has just been so interesting because it feels like we are seeing the change of eras, right? Because we have who's the top 2 seeds in the Western Conference? It's Anthony Edwards and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander leading the way. Out east, Jason Tatum's been there for a minute, right? And then we have guys like Tyrese Haliburton breaking out. It's a league that's becoming younger. And on top of that, it's a league that is becoming bigger, much bigger. Look what Orlando's doing. Look at what Cleveland's doing, even though that team is filled with injuries right now. Look at what Minnesota's doing. Look at what Denver's doing. Look at what Boston's doing. You can go on and on and on. Teams are getting huge right now. And there was a point a couple years ago where people were genuinely wondering, like, is this the end of the big man? And that was always nonsense, by the way. That was always nonsense. Because when the Warriors came into the NBA, or not the Warriors, they've been in the NBA forever, but when the Warriors really took storm in the mid-2010s, I think they couldn't have picked a better time. Obviously, because what they did was they innovated the game in a lot of ways, anchored by Stephen Curry. The Warriors, they played small ball. And when they came into the league, big men were still relatively traditional. And everybody wanted to be big. And then the Warriors come in and it's like, okay, we're young, we're small, but we can shoot the crap out of the ball. We can switch like hell. We can move the ball like hell. We're fast like hell. And, we're good defensively because we have enough versatility. The Warriors were able to just define the odds of math. That's what they did. They literally said the value that we bring as three-point shooting guards outweighs the value that a traditional big provides in the paint, because the big man can't guard us either, because either we take him out of the paint and we got a spot in the rim, or they give us space or making that shot. And the three-point shot, especially the corner three outside of a layup, is the most efficient shot in basketball. So for a long time, the Warriors just defied analytics. They took the big man out of the game. And over time, though, we're seeing the adaptation occur, the evolution occur. Big men are getting skilled again. It started out with Nikola Jokic and Embiid and Karl Anthony Towns getting into the scene after guys like Roy Hibbert and Dwight Howard fizzed out. And now we're seeing in the NBA right now, Victor Wembanyama, Chet Holmgren. We're getting all these quote-unquote unicorns, but it's becoming a commonality. And even like role players are becoming good shooting bigs at this point in time. So the big man, at the same time, we're seeing it with the Minnesota Timberwolves right now, who are 19-5. You can see the background. I kind of like that. But we're seeing that they are bringing the advantages that the traditions of basketball have presented for 100 years. They're bigger and they're stronger and they're better at protecting the rim than everybody else. But with guys like Naz Reid and Karl Anthony Towns, for a lot of the year, the only two guys in the NBA shooting 50, 40, 90, there was just enough skill in the perimeter for the weaknesses of the big to not really matter. They had enough versatility where they can do some of the things that you could do with small ball, but also maintain what has been the biggest advantage in basketball history, which has been being bigger and taller, because you get more efficient shots at the rim, and protecting the rim, you're taking a single spot away from 5 different players. The Warriors are so far ahead in skill than teams of traditional big men that those strengths were outweighed. But now today we're seeing the skill of the big man catching up, where the average skilled 7-footer will never be as skilled as the average 6'2" guy. But you can get skilled enough where you lower the margin for the big gap in terms of size, which presents strengths and rebounding, protecting the rim, blah, blah, blah. The gap of the strengths that big men have and the guards lack is far bigger than the ones that the guards possess and the bigs lack. Therefore, big men are becoming prominent in basketball, and it's going to continue becoming prominent. I mean, in this year's draft, we got Alex Sarr, who can switch, protect the rim, shoot. The year after, we got this dude from Africa named Malwash, who's 7'2", and he can shoot and do all these things. This is not going away. Big men are going to be skilled now, and many of them will present the traditional strengths of a big man. So I don't think we're ever going to see small ball ever again. And I think going forward, a team like the Golden State Warriors, the way it was constructed, can never win a championship again. I don't believe it. Stephen Curry, as great as he is, that team's just too small. They innovated the game so the big man could catch up. But now that's happened. I think the Warriors, their greatness is a staple in time. And I don't think small ball is going to translate every single era, especially because we're probably never going to see a Steph Curry again who can enhance small ball the way he has. So it's very interesting the way the NBA is evolving in regards to small ball. Okay, so this is my last topic of this episode of the What's on Tap NBA podcast. And I want to talk about the 2024 NBA draft. You're going to hear me a lot talk about the draft on this show because I'm a draft nerd, quite frankly. And I hope you guys are too. And if you guys are, we're going to be great. You guys, this will be a great relationship. And this draft class, the rumors are true. I'm not a huge fan of even with this class, I'm not a huge fan of just, labeling a draft class definitively, but a lot of the signs point toward this draft not being good. There's not a lot of clear-cut number one prospects. All of them have clear weaknesses, and some of the safe guys, they don't feel like they have the ceiling to be that guy. And the guys who have the traits of potentially being, a primary guy, feel like they lack the traits that some of the best engines in the league do. It's an interesting balance. Like, I'm not a huge fan of saying like this draft is deep, this draft is a ton of depth. Like that can be true, but it feels like every year, like the level of evaluation in the middle, late in the draft, it feels like the same. It feels like every year there's like a pretty decent feel. Like it's almost like a NPC, like CPU generation of players. And it's like, okay, about 30% of these guys will make it, 70% won't. Feels like that every single year when you talk about middle and late in the draft. But this draft at the top, which is how most drafts are evaluated by, it's not very impressive. I mean, I'm going to go off of some of the guys I think have a chance to go number one this year. I think the most popular name is Alex Sarr. And I mean, he's the NBL center. He's 7'1", very talented defender, 7'5" wingspan, really switchable, really good rim protector. I mean, we saw like high tape of him just like locking up Ron Holland, who's another guy I'll talk about. He's an unbelievable defensive talent. And in a league where I just talked about, like the big man's coming back and it's coming back in a mobile, modern way, he fits that archetype. And because he's more of a play finisher than creator offensively, he's safe to put next to a primary guy. So if you're a team at the top of the draft, like the Charlotte Hornets with LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller, for example, or the Spurs with Victor Wembanyama, or you can go on and on and on. Maybe Memphis with Ja Morant. You're probably looking for a guy to complement that guy than be the main guy if you don't see a generational prospect. So that's where I think Alexander Sarr fits. It's that we're pretty confident he's not a main guy, but at the same time, he has a lot of those Jaren Jackson Jr. type tools that make you think he can complement a star at a potential all-star level caliber impact without getting in the way. So I think that's the argument for Alex Sarr. And then you look at Isaiah Collier at USC. I mean, I think he's fun, man. He's fun. He's 6'5". I don't think he's actually 6'5". He's probably 6'4". Short arms, but he's super strong, stout, great first step, great finishing through contact, decent playmaking flashes, jump shots gotten a little better. He's a talented offensive guy. I compare him to like a Baron Davis, if you guys remember him, former all-star guard in the 2000s. There's real questions, though, about that jump shot. There's real questions about, can this guy as a shooter be good enough to be a dynamic slasher? Because he doesn't have the verticality that a Ja Morant has. And when you are a non-shooting slashing guard without verticality, that's a question. That's a big question. So, especially if you don't get to the free throw line at an elite rate or make it at an elite rate. So, I think that's a question with Collier, but he's really talented. He deserves that number one nod. Ron Holland, NBL, unbelievable lately. Started like crap to start the year. He had like 12 turnovers in a game. It was horrendous. But he's steadily gotten better in the last couple of weeks. He's averaging over 25 points per game. His turnovers have gone down to under 4 a game. So a little less concerning than it was to start the year. He's just giving you 20 every night now. And the funny thing is, Jalen Green, Scoot Henderson were considered amazing prospects, borderline generational, number one worthy if there wasn't a Cade in their draft when people thought Cade was special. And Victor Wembanyama, right? When you compare the production, Ron Holland is giving you more points a game than those guys. He has a higher field goal percentage than those guys. He's a way better defender than both of those guys. But we're talking about Ron Holland like, oh, man, he's just like a guy. He's a guy in a bad draft. He's going high because he's a guy in a bad draft. But he's more productive than those guys. And better on both ends of the floor. So that's it. That's just an interesting thing to consider. Like, I think Ron Holland might deserve a little more respect. Like, jump shot needs work, 26% from three, 79% from the line. I understand all that. But at the same time, Ron Holland, his jump shot's gotten better off the dribble, and his free throw is steadily increasing it throughout the year. So it might end up at like 30-74 splits or something. 30 from three, 74 from the line. And if he does that, I think he deserves number one consideration, because in the modern NBA, you want a wing who can score and defend. Ron Holland this year, while he's not an elite shot creator, he's an excellent finisher through contact who can create as a secondary guy. He's intense as heck. I mean, he could be like a Jalen Suggs, Marcus Smart level motor guy and just be an insane defender. I mean, a two-way wing is what you want in the modern NBA, and Ron Holland is that. And to finish this off as the last guy who could be number one in this draft is my number one prospect in this draft right now, by the way, Nikola Topic. We had Nikola Jokic. We had Nikola Jovic. Now we have Nikola Topic. And coincidentally, they all are from the same program, Mega Basket, in Serbia. So there's a lot of intrigue with this kid. He is going to be possibly the youngest player in this upcoming draft, and he's killing it. Over 18 points a game, over 6 assists a game, 72% in the paint as a guard. He could finish with both hands. I think in the NBA right now, what you want is a guard who knows how to create his own gravity. Somebody who, when the defense pressures him, he knows what decision he can make. A guard that provides enough counters where he can finish with either hand, and there's always rim pressure. And here's the thing, rim pressure is the most important part of basketball. Even when you're a great shooter, better rim pressure makes shooting easier. When you get to the rim a lot and you collapse the defense, it makes getting shooters open easier. So it is so important being able to do that. And Nikola Topic, at this point in time, is the most polished slasher in the draft. And he's 6'6", 6'5". He's got long arms. He is a little upright. He moves funny. It's like you're watching like Bob Cousy-ish, maybe a little bit Josh Giddey-ish with the upright nature, but he's quick as heck. He can change change speeds like heck. And like I said, he can just get to the rim at will. He isn't a vertical athlete, and he's not a great shooter, which makes sound hypocritical because I just said that about Isaiah Collier as a question, and that's the same question about Topic. But I'm a little at ease with those questions than I am with Collier, because he is a really good the free throw shooter. He can hit spot up threes, and I think his coordination around the rim is just so unbelievable. I just don't doubt it's going to work in the NBA. I mean, he can make a layup through contact with both hands. He can throw it up at the glass at so many different angles, at so many different like spins, and he can fade away from the rim and make a layup. Like he's like a slashing savant, like a Manu Ginobili was, or Tony Parker. Just mention all these Spurs players, right? He's going to go play next to Victor at this rate, but he's just so unreal at finishing with either hand, at finishing through contact, and he's the best pick and roll playmaker at the top of this draft. He makes everybody around him better. He's not big in turnovers, and he's number one in assists in his league and number two in points as an 18-year-old kid playing in a league that lacks NBA caliber athletes, but a league that is massive. Serbia is one of the biggest leagues in the world, just in terms of pure size, and he's getting to the rim at will. So size and strength and physicality won't be an issue for him in the NBA. So I truly believe Nikola Topic, if he puts it together, could be a legitimate all-star guard. And I do believe at the top of the draft, as much as you want a complimentary guy who works with your main guy, I think if you have a number one overall pick, you should be looking for an engine. And if you ask me who's the best bet in this upcoming draft to become an engine on the offensive end, I truly believe it's Nikola Topic. I believe it's truly Nikola Topic. And it's going to be so interesting what happens, because if Nikola Topic doesn't work, he probably just won't work in the NBA as a starter. Like he could probably be a good backup if he doesn't work, but his floor is a little lower than a Sar or a Holland, but I just feel so much better about him being a main offensive guy that it doesn't really bug me. And I mean, with him and Collier, like he's younger than Collier and he's just better, So I think Topic is unbelievable. I never heard of him 5 months ago, but now that I've heard of him, his tape is great. And I think Those are the four names you could look at the top of the draft. Another guy who can maybe slide into the conversation, or two guys, Montes Bezelis of the G League, 6'10", very skilled. He's playing better lately. And then Zachary Sachet. He's also French like Alex Sarr. Unbelievable shooter, athletic 6'10" guy. The NBA loves those connective, athletic, versatile wings. So that's the top of the 2024 NBA draft. Very interesting class. Not great. 2025 looks better. Most classes look better, but doesn't mean there won't be great players in this draft, because every year there is. And once in a while, I'm not saying it'll be 2020, but 2020 had similar bashings and similar criticisms for similar reasons. They said there's no trustworthy prospect at the top. But guess who went number one in that draft? The best number one pick in a long time, Anthony Edwards. And then you had LaMelo Ball. And then later you had Tyrese Haliburton. And then Tyrese Maxey. And then Desmond Bane, Jaden McDaniels, Devin Vassell. Like, that turned out to be a good class. So it's going to be a very fascinating upcoming months, seeing how the stocks change. But that's kind of my radar check right now at the top of the 2024 NBA draft. And that is going to do it for the first episode of the What's on Tap NBA podcast. Sincerely appreciate everybody for listening. And I'll be here weekly. I don't know what I'll do next week. I'll try to find a guest. If I don't, I'll do something similar to this. But until next time, thank you guys so much for listening, and peace out, y'all. This is the What's on Tap NBA podcast.